This video is going to cover how I tape my patterns together after I print them off. And I'll also go over what I do if I want to just keep a pattern instead of having to reprint it every time and tape it all together. Make it kind of a reusable pattern. First, quick, this purse I'm doing a giveaway with. It turns out Wanda Beasley won this. So if she can get a hold of me, I'll send this out to her as soon as I can. So I'll get into the pattern and how I tape that together, and then what I go through, a couple different ways of what I do if I just want to reuse a pattern a few times. And actually, if you're careful, it'll last quite a while if you do what I'm going to be talking about here in a couple minutes. Alright, so I'm going to go over how I get these patterns taped together. You can already see this one, every other part, I cut that dotted line right out in the middle, and I leave every other one uncut. It makes it a lot easier to line stuff up. And even if I'm not cutting that line out just right, I'm able to line things up still. So the next step, since I got those all taped together, is kitty corner from that, like a checkerboard pattern. The one underneath this is the one I'm going to cut out. So I try to cut that line, that dotted line, right in half. But if I'm a little off and I start to sway back and forth, it's not a huge deal. And sometimes I'll even come in and cut the dotted line off just on a chunk or two. It makes it a little easier for me to line stuff up, actually. So I'll just bop in real quick and then come right back up to that line, try to cut that dotted line right in half. Pop over for a second. I'm sure there's plenty of different ways to do this. This is just how I do it. I would finish cutting that whole row out first, but you can see if I take that line and it's missing a chunk right here, so I can actually see that dotted line underneath to make it even a little easier. And I try to line it up to make that dotted line full thickness. Now, with these parts where I'm not cutting the dotted line, I will cut those corners off. Right at that corner of that dotted line. That way, when I'm doing these parts underneath here, I can have this lay over the top of this one that's uncut. And I'm able to match those corners right up. And I'll just keep following that method for each row and work my way down. I'm about halfway done or more with this one. I'm just going one at a time. This one was completely cut out, so this next one I just trim those corners so I can go underneath, and then on top of the ones that aren't cut out above it on the above row, so I can meet them corners up. And I'm just looking at that line and trying to make it as thick, make out the dots as thick as one that isn't cut or overlapped. And matching up all the lines of the pattern, obviously. You can use scissors or whatever. I'm just trying to cut this dotted line right in half. And if you're putting something like this together here and you're finding that you can't get both lined up at the same time, what I do in that case is just cut this piece of paper here and maybe cut a little strip out. A little, maybe an 1/8 inch strip or something, so that the two sides don't mess with each other, but then I can just line up this part and then separately line that part up. So this is what I'm talking about there. Like that. And take a secondary strip out. That way the papers aren't butting up against each other, messing with each other. Then I can go like this. Get that one right on the nose. Okay, so I usually start by, I'll make sure stuff's taped. A lot of times before I start cutting it out into sections like this, I make sure it's good and taped so it doesn't start peeling apart and moving the pattern itself, moving around. This one got folded up a little bit, but so what I do, if I want to save a pattern, there's a couple things I'll do. Sometimes I'll just go over it with tape and cut it out, and that's decent. But what I like to do even more than that is I'll cut the parts out into sections. A lot of times I'll leave them in pretty big sections. And then I'll take a piece of tag board and kind of get an idea of where this is going to be. And just mark kind of where I want this spray adhesive. So I'm going to have it on the top part of that. What I'll do is I'll flip this around. I know it's going to be glued down right about there, so I put a couple pen marks on there. I'll move this up so that I can just hit both at the same time, the back of the pattern itself and the tag board. And if I'm close to an edge, if I'm spraying this, so what I do is I move this off of those marks enough so I can just spray the back of the pattern and the tag board at the same time. What I do is when I'm spraying close to the edges, I don't just haphazardly go around spraying. I like to try to spray inwards from any edge. So the spray back's pretty minimal, but you know, ideally you'd probably go do this outside or something. Just try to get it to go inward. So you can see here I didn't put tape on the top, and that's going to make it difficult if those were two separate parts where that pattern came together. Set this on here, make sure it's like going to fit. You get it on there, hover it above there to make sure it'll fit, and you don't want to stretch it too much, but you want it to get down, lay nice and flat. Press it down good, and I'll let that dry. I mean, it only takes a couple minutes. It's probably already good to cut out, but what I like to do after that is I'll still go over the top with tape. Now just the tape alone is okay, especially if it's small parts, but for bigger stuff I really like doing both steps. So I'll cover each one of these pattern parts, just the parts itself. With the tape too, you don't want to stretch it out, you want it to just lay down flat. And then from there I just cut it out. Utility knife. And I'm cutting the line right in half. And I'll cut these parts out. Make it easier to manipulate and finish cutting around that. Punch all the holes, do everything I need to do. And then they last for quite a while like that. Unless you're making thousands of something, you really don't need the acrylic templates, although those things are pretty nice to use. So I'll do that. And so let's say you spent all that time putting one of these patterns together. You might as well do something like this, add an extra step so you don't have to do that every time. Although some of the parts it's easier just to tape these together and to have them so you can just, like I do in my videos, you tape them down and just punch and cut everything. But to each their own, I suppose. And if you're the type of person that doesn't want to print out stuff at all and you buy like one of my patterns that's already done for you, you just get the physical pattern in the mail, do this to it and it'll last quite a while.